This is the e-learning podcast, episode number 51.
And we are working only with what we call soft skills. So that's leadership, development, professional development, sales, customer service, and how you build performance teams. And we had an idea that we ought to utilize the latest technology, e-learning, and coaching all together.
Welcome to the e-learning podcast. My name's Laddick, and I'm your host from lmspulse.com. My guest for today is Peter Horwing, founder of Chart Adaptive Learning. With a model that puts technology at the service of the individual, Chart offers a mix of interactive content and one-on-one coaching on soft skills that ensures no one is left behind. In this flexible yet meticulous conversation, we talk about things like why Peter and company decided soft skills was the most important challenge Chart had to face, and why adaptive learning specifically is, in Peter's opinion, the best way to influence behavior both effectively and measurably. We also talk about the difference between conscious and unconscious incompetence, or why we so often don't realize how much we don't know about the skill that we think we know. We also talk about the key importance of one-on-one accountability to fill in all these gaps, and why mentorship is often the fastest way to ensure learning. Finally, we dive deep into Chart's coaching model, how technology enhances the reach and quality of the relationship, and some of Peter's most memorable success cases. Or why, in the middle of the worst wave in the pandemic, a South African hospital realized their best decision was to invest in customer training for healthcare professionals. But before we get started, a quick word from our sponsors.
The e-learning podcast is sponsored by the e-learning Success Summit. Learn from more than 40 experts how to teach, work, and learn online without being overwhelmed. Get your free ticket to the summit at elearningsuccesssummit.com. And lmspulse.com, your best source for news, information, and resources for e-learning professionals for more than 10 years. Get our free roundup of the week's top news at lmspulse.com.
Hello, Peter. Welcome to the e-learning podcast. How are you today?
Thank you. Just great.
Excellent.
Sitting in Sweden with clear blue skies outside.
You stole my first question. Fantastic. Sweden. That's awesome. I don't know if we've ever had anybody from Sweden on the show before. That's fantastic. Clear blue skies. We're recording this on, sort of the second third, 2/3 into June of 2021. Peter, since you've already told us where you're sitting, another thing that I've been asking everybody on the podcast, just as a small time capsule, is what's the COVID situation like in Sweden right now, where you're sitting?
Well, right now, we are in the summertime and more or less everything is open. Sweden has, in difference from many other countries, we haven't really been closed down in that way. And we've had clear social distancing. We've had about average casualties as such, but the business has been moving on quite well all the time.
Okay, excellent. That's great to hear. Peter, you are the CEO of Chart Learning Solutions. And one of the things that we're going to talk, or the thing that we're going to talk about today, is adaptive learning, which is something I'm really excited to kind of get into the weeds about. Why don't we just start with that itself? Define for us, for anybody who has no idea, what is adaptive learning? Like, what do you mean by adaptive learning?
Yeah, and we should get very clear on that. But just a short background on that, because my background, I've been running stock listed Swedish companies for many, many years. And I've seen people growing in all different areas, leaders, sales, etc. And when I left the corporate world in 2014, I went into the learning world and we started off Chart Learning Solutions. And we are working only with what we call soft skills. So that's leadership, development, professional development, sales, customer service, and how you build performance teams. And we had an idea that we ought to utilize the latest technology, e-learning, and coaching all together. And when you get into soft skills, then you get into behavioral changes. And that is a little bit more complicated, if it's going to be a 1 or a 0, because there can be different views if you talk about ethics and so on. And I'll be happy to talk more about that. But that means we have, over the 5-6 years since 2015, when I started this off, and I should say, Chart Learning Solutions grew up since early 2000 in San Diego, actually. So there's been a long time. But when you get into adaptive learning, because that is what we call the future of e-learning, it's a lot artificial intelligence. It's been grown up actually very much in the medical society, and it's just right now it's moving into talent management, leadership development. And what is really the difference? Well, there are a few differences. First of all, when you look at adaptive learning, you will always become 100% proficient based on your learning objectives. So if you take a class, as we all have done in school or wherever, you sometimes you sit off the time, and then it's the test in the end, and then you do 24 hours reading, and then you're back on track again. The same happens with e-learning. You sit on there, and then you try to jump to the end and see if you don't know the questions, and maybe you jump. But really no accountability in there, and that is really what we have solved with the e-learning. But with adaptive learning, you have to know the stuff.
Okay.
So if you take an example here, let's say we have 3 users in Ernst & Young as a company.
Okay.
And they are doing project management introduction. And then we have Stephen as the first one. He's been there 15 years in the company. He knows this pretty well. And you're doing it. It's going to take you about 8 minutes to do that. And you will become 100% proficient. So what happened here is really that you had quite a lot of pre-knowledge around this, and you could progress in your own pace. The other guy maybe been there 25 years, and it actually took him 20 minutes to do it. And he's going to have a complete different learning path. And then you have a newbie who's been there only half a year, and it takes him 33 minutes to do the same course. And here we are getting into something. It is that adaptive learning is the closest you can come to having your own tutor, your own teacher, your own trainer. You can make a comparison. You and I, we were out driving in the older days. We always took up the map, looking, and most of the time we got there. Not always, but most of the time. But today, we are running with Google Maps or similar like that. And that is what adaptive learning is. Depending on your pre-skills, it will always take you on the fastest route to the end. And it will continuously change. So if there are things you start to stumble about, then it'll deep dive you. And more than that, it's also going to find out a few things about you. So what we measure here, along with this, is something called conscious incompetence.
Okay.
We can get into that.
I was just saying, before we go there, I want to dial it back. I want to tell me first, why did you make the choice to focus on soft skills? What was the critical business need or market need, or when you sat down with whomever else and said, okay, Chart is going this direction? Why soft skills? Why was that the key thing that you went?
Well, as many things in life, it's partially a coincidence. But on the other side, I've been working as a leader 25 years in stock listed companies, and I know that makes the difference. And then in 2019, Stanford University and LinkedIn came out with a report showcasing that 75% of the skills to make your career is all about soft, how you communicate, how you influence, how you solve the problems, your ethics, your standards, and how well I listen to you, and so on. And only 25% is actually the technical skills. That was 2019. Today, I just ran a report for 20 of our coaches. Udemy just shown what has happened on the soft skills side, and it's between 1,000 and 2,000% up between 2020 and 2019. And we see exactly the same numbers by Sharp Learning Solutions. It has just dramatically increased. And of course, as you and I sitting here, listening to each other, we have to have some kind of listening skills. And that has been so clear in the pandemic. We started using new tools. We actually have to listen, see, communicate well, present well, and all those. And that's soft skills. So that is the main thing. I had a lot of experience. The other thing was that the partner, which we started off, she was the subject matter expert and one of the most proficient people in the US in this area. And has written numerous of courses. So putting those skills together was important.
Fantastic. And then you say you've got a coaching model with with the adaptive learning model that leads, sort of it's a I hate to use the term hybrid, but it's a package that comes together. How does the adaptive learning model that you have interact with coaching, interact with, the outcomes that you're seeking to achieve? And then, does the coach support the adaptive learning model? Do they help the client choose? How does that work?
That's a good question. So some call this the blended learning formula, but our model is researched. It's called the performance assurance system. And that is to really get the real results. And it really consists of three main parts. Initially, you start off with what we call skills inventory assessments. So if we look at a leader, our research has shown that there are 13 core competencies, which each and every leader needs to have in order to be proficient, to be a good leader. And so that's where you start off. We're going to get, the analysis, strong side, less strong side. And you can consolidate that for a company so they actually can see, okay, out of our 50 leaders, well, here are some, they need coaching, mentoring. We really need to work on rewards and recognition, maybe some critical thinking and so on. Then you move into what we call the personal mastery. And the personal mastery, dependent on the curriculum you put together, the training path you put together, then you have the adaptive learning, which is the best practice. And each adaptive learning is then optimized all the time. It changes all the time depending on your answers. So you get your unique path. What we also have built into that module is what we call peer reviews. So you have to start to apply the skills rather immediate. So then let's say we are working with coaching and mentoring, then you start to apply that. And that goes anonymously to another person who gives you feedback. And what happens here is we're starting to build accountability. So people want to do good with others. And then the fourth element in the adaptive learning is that next time you get into the system, it remembers that, well, you had some problems in these areas. So it's going to pick up that immediately. So what it does, it really focuses on your weak areas where you really have the skills, you can move faster. Then after each of the courses, you have the coaching. So that's really where you have work material, how you apply the skills in your different areas. We can put scenarios in there for the company specific, etc. And you have a coach, and that coach, he or she normally has what we call accountability meetings, which means that when you are able to orally explain what you've learned and how you start to apply it, then it starts to sit up in the brain. So that's the model. But in reality, easy skills inventory assessments, you have the adaptive learning training, and then you make sure in groups or individual, make sure that sticks into your environment. So you get the real results.
So let's just take leadership. So does that mean that you have 13 different modules? Since you said, there's these 13 skills that you've identified. I guess what I really like to get into the weeds of, how difficult is this to create? Because if we have, and I'd love to just sort of hear more about the back end. Is this just a really complex choose your own adventure that, people kind of filter through, or is this really like AI adapting the material on the fly? Or
no, it is complex. So if you take short learning solutions, we are specialized in the soft skills area, and we also have our technology in all the e-learning.
Okay.
When it comes to the adaptive learning, we are working with one of the world leading Area 9 Lyceum. It's a Danish company. They've been around for 25 years. There's been 30 million users. There's 8 billion of data points around this. And there's a lot of statistics. And that has been, step by step. And just over the last years, they're working with about 100 of the largest corporations in the world, which is now rolled out with the soft skills. So that is an area. And even though we have the material, take these leadership, we have the same in sales, customer service, and so on. It has to be redone everything, because it's a total different way. It's a lot more probing, and you have to validate your skills. And if you answer a little bit wrong, it takes you on a totally different route. So same, but very different in the way how you learn.
Yeah.
So you can do leadership training or sales training, same material, but the outcomes are so different. I just came from this call I mentioned with 20 coaches, and we actually had one of the South African leading hospital companies providing nurses doing, the shots for the pandemic. And they concluded that they needed customer service training. And a lot of people, and that was in the midst of their second wave.
Yeah.
And, that was really hectic. They were working, all the time. And they really wasn't into doing training in the midst of this. But they got going, and we had the coaching model is exactly what I explained to you. And today they're in the third wave in Johannesburg right now. And they have made terrific changes. And they continuously, every day in the office, they talk about, okay, maybe we can do it like this, and how they handle the customers who are, pretty many times pissed off because they haven't got the shots, they're hectic in the telephone, and, all that comes into such a positive way for them. So even though in such situations, when you have the time to talk to people, you mix the technology and the human interaction, you can get really great results.
Nice. So what does a adaptive learning module look like to me as a user? So is it visual? Is this a text-based scenario? Is this something that I'm sort of clicking through screen by screen? Like, is it virtual reality? What's the typical scenario that we would look at?
The answer would be yes.
All right, great, nice.
Yeah. Because there's really no limitation on the adaptive learning. You'll find courses with virtual reality. You'll find courses with a lot of videos. When it comes to example, leadership training, it's actually a mix. So there are questions, but if you look at the screen, for example, you have the automatic coach there sitting, helping you out, talking in English, for example, or German. You have on the left side, you'll start off and you have to identify yourself in the sense, am I a novice in this topic, or am I, expert, or am I in between? And if you say, well, I'm pretty good at this, then it's going to try you out. And if that does not work, then it'll take you back. And you'll have the time up there in the top. Maybe it says 17 minutes left, and then you stop. Shit, I don't really know this, and then it says 24 minutes.
Oh, okay.
So and you also have very nice things that if there is anything in a course, because when you're developing courses, you want feedback, and there is a small button called Challenge Us. So as soon, it could be a misspelling, or there could be something else. Then you just press that and say, well, here's that, and it goes directly to our developers.
Oh, cool.
We can bring it up and we can get immediate feedback. And that's really how you can make great progress on this. So
how often do people challenge the adaptive learning? Is this something that's super frequent, or every now and then, or?
No, I don't think it's the adaptive learning itself. It's more by actually providing that type of functionality. And now when we've been running pilots with customers, we actually get immediate feedback, and we've done a number of changes before you get into scaling up the rollouts. So it's just a great feature, and people actually use it. And I think it's positive they use it and say,
of course,
not sitting quiet. I mean, on our other courses, you don't have that function, so we always think it's all perfect. But
absolutely, I love the real-time feedback function. I mean, we've talked about it on other episodes as well. Just the ability to raise your hand in a course or give feedback to the instructor on either what's happening now or what the material is about. I think the real-time feedback feature is fantastic. How culturally adaptive is the adaptive learning? I guess, when you're putting together leadership skills, let's just, I continue to sort of focus on that one since that's the one you mentioned. I'm sitting here in Latin America. Don't tell the Mexicans that I'm sitting here in Mexico, but even from Mexico to Central America to South America, right? There's pretty massive cultural differences. Yeah. But then, if we were to take that over to Asia, we'd have a whole different universe. Talk to me about how do we approach that in this kind of scenario?
It's actually no difference in the adaptive learning from the e-learning world, etc. So from our perspective, we develop all our courses based on, you can say, US. And from there, we look at, okay, what are the best practices in all the different topics? But clearly, you can easily get a little bit of US touch on that. And then we rolled it out in South Africa. And there you have the Ubuntu. Ubuntu is the culture in there. And then there was a really good discussion with the initial customers on how this is done. But what you fast realize, since you have the coaching side in there, that's really where you listen on how to apply to your local Ubuntu, your local cultural things. And at the same time, you get the international flavor. So you get the international best flavor, and then you say, okay, how do we handle this if we are in the Middle East, if we are in Mexico, if we are in South Africa? So you get that mix. And people actually love that because, we are in a global world and you need to understand international best practices, but you also have to apply it locally. And if we work with Germany, then many times it has to be translated to German and so on, because that's the way they want to be taught.
All right.
So you actually do handle that. You don't have to rewrite the best practices, but on how you apply it. That's the clue in all of this.
Okay, excellent. What stops me as either a school or a company or whomever from choosing adaptive learning? It sounds like this is the closest thing to, live in-person instruction where we really have that human interaction and we can adapt on the fly, right? What is it? Cost? Is it timed implementation? Is it, I just don't know about it? What are the biggest hurdles that you find as somebody who's selling this?
Well, I mean, some of the benefits why the largest corporations are moving into this is that since there's a unique learning path in here, then you do have between 30 and 50% less time, because your senior managers, they have higher skills that can actually move faster through. They don't have to go from A to Z. They just check that the stuff. And of course, if you get more time, then it's a good ROI into it. No, I think it's rather the technology is out there now. It's been during development over a long time. It can perfectly match well with e-learning technology, with adaptive learning technology. some courses may be better run in an e-learning environment, and many others in the adaptive learning environment. But there's a big hype around this right now because everyone is looking at this, 100% proficiency, getting the time to do it a lot faster. That's the ROI. And then there are some other benefits into it too.
Awesome. You had mentioned earlier something called conscious incompetence and unconscious incompetence. So what are those specifically, and how are they, and why are they important for us to understand?
Well, if we start with the easy one, conscious incompetence. So what does that mean? It means that I know I don't know this stuff. A good leader, that's the first thing he really needs to know about himself. That is what I don't know, where my weak areas are, because that's how you build the teams, your management team, and getting that as a comprehensive. But there are a large amount of people, which we have seen the statistics, who actually have 30 to 40% when they do trainings of unconscious incompetence. So what does that mean? It means that, yeah, I know this, but in reality, you don't. And when people believe they know something, but they don't really know it anyhow, then it is when things goes wrong.
Can you give me do you have a concrete example of any of the soft skills? Like, what is it that maybe, what do most people believe that they're good at? Maybe is it conflict resolution? Is it?
Yeah, you can see, but what most leaders, especially, we have a large amount of middle managers, they believe they're good leaders.
And in fact, they're actually what they are is middle managers.
They believe they're good listeners. They believe they're good at delegating. They believe they are good at giving feedback. But in reality, that's not how it works. And if you do the adaptive learning, then you actually get these insights. And it makes you aware of that, okay, I actually have a few things here. And the analytics, which you also get, say from the managers or the coaches along, they can actually support you to become a good and great leader. But I see it everywhere. These things, people believe they know this stuff. They believe how to coach someone. They believe how to reward someone. They believe, but they don't. They believe that they can handle in customer service a difficult call, or how they bond with people and so on. There's so many small things in these settings that because every probe you actually work through, you also have to answer, I know this stuff, I think I know this stuff, to I don't have a clue.
Right.
And in the end, you should know this stuff, and it will track. And from the analytics point, we can see exactly where people have been struggling, and how much time it takes for them, and that also means that we can support them in their roles to be good leaders and professionals.
I want to put a pin in that because I want to hear more about the analytics. I'm very interested to hear what is it that we're analyzing. But my first question is, let's just go back to that scenario of the company with 50 middle managers, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe 500 middle managers. And, obviously there's a reason why they're the middle managers, right? They haven't bubbled up because they're like, do you find that there's a lot of pushback from that cadre of people saying, hey, wait a second, you don't know what you're talking about. I know this, or normally are they very receptive to this kind of, when they get in the adaptive learning model, they're like, wow, I guess I did have that limp. I guess I did have that gap. Or what's the human reaction usually?
Well, the insight is not always the best. That's as soon as you're coming close. So on the one side, people want to learn, and if you build any program right from the beginning, so it has clear sponsorship with it, and people, you can start with the assessment, then you start, well, somebody is seeing you, and then you start working, somebody is following up with you, and then you get into the coaching discussion, the team and the coach, you actually discuss, and people become very open. And what happens is that you get not only your own development, but you build best practices, you build the bonding and all these things, and people get to know each other through the learning. So I don't think there's any more resistance in adaptive learning than in other type of learnings. The only difference is you have better outcomes. That's not bad.
That's great. I guess.
Yeah.
And I guess it's really how you present it at the end of the day, right? If you present this as, hey, we're testing you to see where you're deficient, and or if you say, hey, look, this is your opportunity to grow as a professional, to continue, and then it's really about how you present it. Let's go to sort of the analytics. Like what do we pay attention to in adaptive learning? I've heard you mention time on several occasions here. So how long did you take to answer the scenario or come up with your answer? What other variables are important in adaptive learning that you pay attention to?
Well, I think it's more to see what areas where people are struggling, and also areas where people believe they know the stuff and they actually don't. Where you can have the dialogues with them and actually get the self-reflection going. But the analytics today is so comprehensive. So in principle, we can slice and dice more or less everything if we want to. And it's also important for us developing training to see, if there are areas which, if it's not one, maybe it's 100 having trouble with something, then we have to see, okay, is there something we should do? But I think that the biggest benefits now, at least initial rollouts, is the scaling. So if you have 1,000, 10,000, 50,000 people, and each and every one get their unique learning paths, then we can talk about scaling any type of training. It could be compliance training, it can be whatever as such. That's where you have the real big benefits. I just spoke to one of the big truck companies, and they said, well, that was quite an interesting dialogue. So the woman said, well, I think we should have this for our service technicians, because we're rolling out and they have to know this stuff. But about this unconscious incompetence, what age does that happen? In what age?
What age does that happen? Nice.
So, is it when they get older and a little bit tired, or what could it be? I said, I'm sorry, I don't have that statistics, and I'm not sure if that's the right conclusion either. But it's interesting. People realize, there's a lot of people, they know this stuff, but maybe they don't always do it.
Very interesting.
Yeah,
that's a really interesting thing as well. Like maybe, especially in things like leadership and whatnot, there is what's the best practice and the correct answer, and what's the answer that what is it that you choose to implement, right? So but that's performance review stuff and everything. So I have kind of two questions to wrap up our conversation. The first one is, let's just say I am the L&D, either professional, or I am the heading up the L&D department at my company. I have an e-learning system. Maybe I don't know. We've had several people on the show who don't even have systems in it yet. How does this start? How do we get, is this something where I'm going to have to go to the C-suite and be like, look, this is a pretty significant investment, we're going to go for it? Or can I step into it, piece by piece? Do I have to go in full force? Like, tell me, like, how does this roll out in a company?
That's a good question. So first of all, get some people together and call us, and you'll have a free trial, because we want you to experience the difference on what adaptive learning is and how it is normal and e-learning.
Okay.
Then if you're running any type, Cornerstone on Demand, SuccessFactor, or our training accountability platform, or whatever learning management LXP you actually do have, you can choose to have a single sign-on directly to the adaptive learning platform, or you can actually have a SCORM installation. You can have an XIP or LTI connection directly to your system. So it's just as straightforward as you have with any e-learning as such. But you use a lot more artificial intelligence than you don't have in any of the other courses. So that's the difference. Cost-wise, it's more or less the same. It's no big difference as such. And that I think that's also the way
That's a big
forward.
aha. I would think that there'd be a value add here. That's really interesting to hear.
There is a little value add, but still, when I look at it, it's no major difference actually.
All right. What's that? Then my final question for you to wrap this up is, as someone who is on this path, someone who is excited about the future of e-learning and where we're going with it, what are you looking at for 6 months from now, for a year from now? What's changing in the technology? Maybe it's a new technology, maybe it's a new process, maybe adaptive learning continues to get better. What are you most excited about for the near term future?
Well, there's so many things. First of all, I'm highly excited. As I just mentioned, this head of all the nurses I came from, and when I listen to that woman and you see the results, then you just get filled up with energy.
Sure, yeah.
And then I had another company. It's actually a Swedish international company, and they were going through the adaptive learning side. This is so great. And I say, well, I really have to learn what I'm doing. And then you get the feedback. But, there is so much more. I don't know how much you've been into virtual reality. That's another area which is super exciting. So I think all these, you have to define where does the different things fit. It's not one size fits all. You're going to see a lot of combination of the technologies. The only thing you may not do is to miss to get on the train. You have to get on the train. You have to get your employees starting using it and so on, and get that path going.
I love it. I love that the worst decision is the non-decision, right? The worst decision is to just not participate. That's a very interesting one. Peter Horwing, you're the CEO of Chart Learning Solutions. We've been talking about adaptive learning today. I really appreciate your insights in that. I would love to dive deeper, and I hope that we get a chance to reconnect here in a year or so.
Me too. Thank you so much for joining, or me joining you, Stephen.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So take care, and thank you so much.
Thanks again for tuning into today's episode of the eLearning Podcast. If you like what you heard, please do me the favor of following us on LinkedIn, Twitter, or whichever social media you prefer. Also, if you're interested in diving deeper on e-learning, I encourage you to get your free ticket to the eLearning Success Summit, where there are more than 70 hours of presentations on best practices. Just go to elearningsuccesssummit.com. And then finally, for the latest news, information, and resources about e-learning, come subscribe to our newsletter at lmspulse.com. Thanks.